You know you were an accident, right? I wanted a son. My father said that to my face in front of 31 relatives, 6 Budweisers deep. He was standing on the lawn my mother had carefully planted with hydrangea bushes herself. Smoke from his new Weber grill curled behind him like a halo he hadn't earned. Aunt Carol dropped her paper plate. Potato salad hit the grass. 31 heads turned. No one spoke. I didn't react. I said, "That's interesting. Mom told me something different before she passed. Do you want me to read her letter?" His hand began to shake. That letter contained a truth my father had hidden for 30 years. It didn't just disrupt his 4th of July. It dismantled every lie he had told about my mother, about me, and about whose name was actually on the deed to the house he claimed as his. Before I continue, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And wherever you're listening from, share your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious to know who's here. My name is Myra. I'm 28, and I work as an ICU nurse. Let me take you back 3 years before that 4th of July, to the day my mother received her diagnosis. The house on Maple Lane was a white colonial with green shutters and a wraparound porch that creaked in 3 specific spots my mother knew well. Each morning, before my father woke up, she stepped over the 2nd and 3rd boards on her way to water the hydrangeas barefoot. She moved through the house quietly, as if trying not to disturb anything. I grew up believing that was normal. My father, Rex Harper, kept a dark brown leather La-Z-Boy recliner in the center of the living room, facing the television. The armrests were cracked from use. No one else sat in it. Not my mother, not me, not even Uncle Bill when he visited. It was understood. That chair represented authority, and the rest of us positioned ourselves around it. He controlled the thermostat, 68 in winter, 76 in summer, and no one adjusted it. He controlled the remote, the grocery list, the dinner schedule. My mother prepared what he wanted, when he wanted it, and cleared the plates without being asked. She never had her own bank account. Her name wasn't on the checking account. Every Monday morning, she requested grocery money, and he counted out the bills one by one, aloud, as if she were a cashier. I didn't understand that this wasn't typical until I was 14 and spent a weekend at a friend's house. I watched her mother use a credit card at Target without asking anyone's permission. That moment stayed with me. The house was beautiful because my mother made it that way. Window boxes, an herb garden along the south wall, a porch swing she found at an estate sale. She expressed everything she couldn't say openly through that home. My father still referred to it as his. My roof, my rules, he would say whenever we disagreed. If you don't like it, there's the door. At the time, I didn't know the roof wasn't legally his. Rex Harper was straightforward in his beliefs. He saw himself as head of the household. He believed women played supporting roles, and he considered disagreement disrespect. "What do women know?" was something he said often. At dinner when my mother suggested refinancing, at Thanksgiving when cousin Linda mentioned politics, and to me when I told him I had been accepted into the state nursing program. "Nursing? So you'll be emptying bedpans? I suppose that's fine for a girl." My mother rarely argued. When his voice rose, she became still. Shoulders drawn inward, hands folded, eyes lowered to the tablecloth. I once thought she was being patient. I later understood she was being cautious. One memory stands out. I was 16. He came home frustrated about a parts order at the store and began criticizing me, my grades, my friends, my shorts. His voice dominated the kitchen. I stood at the counter, gripping the edge, determined not to cry. My mother sat behind him. For a brief second, her shoulders relaxed and she exhaled, relief that his focus was on me, not her. Then she looked at me, and that relief shifted into something I couldn't name at the time. Years later, I recognized it as guilt. That night, after he fell asleep in his recliner, she came to my room. She sat on my bed and said quietly, "I'm sorry I can't protect you the way I should." I told her it was okay. It wasn't. The call came on a Tuesday in March. I had just finished a 12-hour clinical shift in the step-down unit and was sitting in my Honda Civic in the hospital parking lot when her name appeared on my phone. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. She said it calmly, as she did with all difficult things. "The doctor says we need to discuss treatment options. I didn't want to interrupt your shift." I drove home immediately, 2 hours on the interstate, gripping the wheel the entire way. When I arrived, my father was in the garage with the door half open, a Budweiser on the workbench, polishing the chrome on his Dodge Ram. He polished that truck every Saturday without fail. During the 14 months of chemo and radiation, he never once drove her to the hospital. Not once. I took her every Tuesday and every other Thursday. I helped her into the passenger seat, kept a plastic bag ready in case nausea came early. I studied pharmacology in the waiting room while chemotherapy ran through her veins. I drove her home, helped her to bed, and left ginger ale on the nightstand. My father's primary complaint during that time was that dinner wasn't ready. In those months, something changed between my mother and Aunt Carol. Their phone calls became longer. Sometimes I'd enter the kitchen, and my mother would lower her voice and say, "I'll call you back, Carol," then smile as if nothing was different. I assumed it was ordinary sisterly support. I didn't realize they were preparing something. My mother passed away on a Sunday in October. The hospice nurse described it as peaceful. I believe her, because I was holding my mother's hand and felt the exact moment she stopped holding mine. My father was downstairs watching football. I managed the funeral arrangements, the calls, the flowers, the obituary in the county paper. Rex remained in his recliner, telling visitors he was too overwhelmed to function. People accepted it. He performed the role of grieving husband convincingly. 5 months later, he introduced Donna. She arrived at Sunday dinner wearing a white cashmere sweater and heels that clicked against my mother's hardwood floors. She sat in my mother's chair at the table, the one closest to the kitchen, where my mother had sat for 30 years. Rex carved the roast as if marking a new chapter. Donna Kessler, 40, real estate agent, blonde highlights, a measured smile. After dinner, Rex slid a manila folder across the table toward me. Just some administrative paperwork for your mom's estate. Lawyer documents. Sign where the tabs are and we'll be finished. I was exhausted. I was grieving. I was 25 and had just spent 14 months watching my mother fade away. I signed most of the pages without reading them. There were 8 or 9 forms. I completed 6 or 7 when my pager went off. Night shift ICU, a patient coding. I left the remaining pages unsigned and told him I'd finish the following week. One of those unsigned pages was a quitclaim deed. I didn't know that at the time. The expired power of attorney form I had signed earlier was already void. Rex simply didn't realize it. Rex moved quickly. Within weeks of that dinner, the phone calls began. Not to me, but to everyone else. Uncle Bill received the first call, then Cousin Patty, the neighbors on Maple Lane, and the women from my mother's church group. Rex's version was consistent. The daughter he had raised and sacrificed for had abandoned him in his grief, refusing to call, visit, or come to dinner. The reality was that I worked 4 night shifts a week and spent my days off sleeping or crying in my apartment. But facts don't spread as fast as a well-timed victim narrative delivered by a man with a steady voice. Uncle Bill texted me one Wednesday at 11 p.m., just after I had lost a patient. My hands still smelled like nitrile gloves. "Your dad is alone, Myra. He lost his wife. Don't be selfish." 2 minutes later, he sent a link to an article titled, "When Adult Children Abandon Aging Parents, a Growing Crisis." I stared at my phone in the break room and felt something I hadn't felt since I was 16. That old familiar shrinking, as if I were the problem. I typed a response, deleted it, wrote another, deleted that as well. What do you say to an uncle who has known you your entire life, but never once asked for your perspective? I called him the next morning and explained the shifts, the exhaustion, the fact that Rex had never visited me. Bill listened for less than a minute before saying, "He's your father, Myra. You only get one." After that, I stopped explaining. There is a difference between people who don't understand and people who refuse to. I didn't yet realize Rex was working towards something specific. The quiet campaign wasn't grief. It was preparation. In April, I returned to the house on Maple Lane to collect a box of my mother's belongings from the upstairs closet, mostly photo albums and a scarf that still carried her Chanel No. 5 scent. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside and paused. The living room looked unchanged. Rex's recliner, the television on mute, beer cans on the side table, but the air smelled different, sweet, artificial perfume. Upstairs, the bedroom door was open. The wedding photo that had hung above the dresser for decades. My mother, in a simple ivory dress, laughing, her hand resting on my father's chest, was gone. The nail remained. In its place was a framed beach sunset. My mother's oak vanity with the oval mirror, where she applied lipstick every morning even during treatment, was covered with Donna's items: brushes, compacts, a bottle of Victoria's Secret body mist where Chanel No. 5 once stood. Donna stepped out of the bathroom in a terry cloth robe, drying her hair. She showed no surprise. "Your dad said you wouldn't mind." From downstairs, Rex called out, "Myra, stop snooping. This isn't your room anymore." I almost left. I almost took my box and walked away. But as I passed through the living room, I noticed a folder on the coffee table beneath a TV guide, marked with a real estate logo, Donna's agency. Inside was a comparable market analysis for 414 Maple Lane. Estimated value, $280,000. He wasn't simply moving on. He was preparing to sell the house. That was the moment I understood this wasn't just insensitivity. It was strategy. 2 weeks later, Rex called me directly for the first time in months. "Come to dinner Friday. Donna's making pot roast." The invitation alone was unusual. He had never asked me to dinner. He either announced it or expected attendance. I went anyway. The table was set for 3. Cloth napkins, a candle, presentation like staging a property. The pot roast was acceptable. The wine was inexpensive. Rex was on his best behavior, which meant he interrupted me only twice. After dinner, he reached behind his chair and produced another manila folder, placing it squarely on the table. "The lawyer said we missed one form last time. It just transfers the property title into my name for estate management. Standard procedure." I opened it. 1 page. The heading read, "Quitclaim Deed." Below it, in plain language, "Transfer of all right, title, and interest in the real property at 414 Maple Lane from the estate of Ellen Whitmore Harper to Rex A. Harper." I read it twice. Donna appeared beside me with a pen. "It's standard, Myra. I see these all the time in real estate." I looked at my father. He wore the same expression I had seen throughout my childhood, the one that meant comply without question. "I'd like my own lawyer to review this," I said. His jaw tightened. "Lawyer? You don't trust your own father?" "If it's routine paperwork," I replied. "There's no urgency. I'll have someone look at it." I placed the quitclaim deed in my bag and drove directly to Aunt Carol's house. Carol Whitmore lived in a brick ranch 12 miles outside town, a home that smelled of coffee and tax documents. She had been a CPA for 25 years, and her kitchen table had likely seen more W-2s than family dinners. She opened the door before I knocked, as if expecting me. I set the quitclaim deed on her oak table, the same table where she and my mother had signed their own paperwork 2 years before my mother passed. Carol read the document once. Her expression didn't show surprise. It showed confirmation. "He's trying to take the house," she said calmly. Then she looked at me. "Myra, the house was never his." She explained without emotion. "Your mother purchased it with inheritance money from your grandparents, the Whitmores. $180,000. The deed is solely in her name. Ellen Whitmore Harper. Rex's name has never been on it." I stared at her. For 30 years, my father had called it his house. For 30 years. "Your mother made a proper will with a lawyer, Richard Avery, downtown," Carol continued. "The house goes to you. Probate is complete. It's yours, Myra. It has been since she died." I couldn't respond. Carol gave me time. Then she walked to her filing cabinet and returned with a sealed cream envelope, my mother's careful handwriting on the front. "For Myra, when she's ready." "Your mother left this as well," Carol said. "She asked me to give it to you when you needed it. I believe you need it now." I held the envelope in both hands. "Read it when you're ready," Carol advised. "But don't read it alone." I didn't open it that night. I sat in my car in Carol's driveway for 20 minutes with the engine off, holding a letter my mother had written for me before she died. I thought about every time my father had said, "My house, my rules," and how my mother must have listened, knowing the truth and remaining silent. She couldn't challenge him openly while she was alive, so she secured her position legally. The next morning, I called the law office of Richard Avery. His receptionist transferred me in less than a minute, which told me he had already been informed. He had a calm, measured voice, the kind of man who reads every line before signing anything, which was exactly what my mother needed. "Miss Harper, I've honestly been expecting your call for about a year." He confirmed everything Aunt Carol had told me. The will was valid. It had been filed, entered into probate, and executed properly. The house at 414 Maple Lane, deed recorded under Ellen Whitmore Harper, transferred to me upon my mother's death as the sole beneficiary. The documentation was clean. The title was clear. Your father has no legal claim to the property, Avery said. He explained that Rex could remain there as a guest, but he could not sell it, mortgage it, or transfer ownership without my signature on a quitclaim deed, which he added was likely why I was calling. I told him about the form Rex had given me. Avery paused. There's something else you should know. About 18 months ago, before your mother passed, a loan officer at First Regional contacted me. Someone had applied for a second mortgage on 4114 Maple Lane. The applicant was Rex Harper. The bank flagged it because his name wasn't on the deed. The application was denied. My stomach tightened. Your mother found out, Avery continued. That's when she called Carol. That's when we finalized the will and established the trust. The trust? I hadn't known about that. $220,000, Avery said. Held in a revocable trust, naming you as beneficiary, funded from your mother's separate inheritance. Mr. Harper has no access to it and no knowledge of its current balance. I sat in my apartment holding the phone, realizing my mother had been calculating and planning while she was dying. A week later, Rex called again. 4th of July barbecue. The whole family's coming. Bring that paperwork signed. I told him I'd attend, but I wouldn't be bringing his documents. I would be bringing my mother's. The 4th of July on Maple Lane looked staged for a photograph. A brand new Weber Genesis grill stood on the patio, the outline of its price sticker still visible. Red, white, and blue bunting lined the porch rails. A folding table stretched across the yard under a checkered cloth, covered with coleslaw, corn, and coolers filled with beer. 31 people, I counted when I arrived. Uncle Bill and his wife Linda near the potato salad. Cousin Patty's children running with sparklers. Rex's co-workers from the auto parts store. Neighbors, church members, a full audience assembled on lawn chairs and blankets beneath a clear sky. Donna stood at the head of the table in a white sundress and new sandals, holding a glass of Prosecco, laughing easily. She played hostess in my mother's yard, beside my mother's hydrangeas, under string lights my mother had hung 3 summers earlier. I came directly from a 12-hour shift, still in my blue scrubs, wrinkled at the knees, badge clipped to my chest. I had not changed intentionally. Everyone there knew what I did for a living. Everyone knew I had been at my mother's bedside. The scrubs were a quiet statement of fact. Aunt Carol sat toward the back, sunglasses on, paper plate resting on her knee. When I walked in, she met my eyes and gave a single nod. In my scrub pocket was the envelope. Beside it, a notarized copy of the will and a printout of the recorded deed. My father noticed my arrival and my empty hands, no folder, no signed form. His smile remained, but his expression shifted slightly. There she is, he announced. I told her to come. She finally listens. By 5 o'clock, he was 6 beers in. I kept count. Working in the ICU makes that automatic. You monitor intake, observe changes, note thresholds. Around the 4th beer, his tone shifted from casual to performative. He stationed himself near the grill, flipping burgers, gesturing with a Budweiser, telling stories louder than necessary, about managing the store, restoring his truck, confronting a county inspector. Stories centered on him, ending with someone else being wrong. Around beer 5, he shifted to family. You know, he said loudly enough for several lawn chairs to hear, I always thought I'd have a boy, someone to take over, teach the business, pass something down. He smiled as if it were humor. Didn't turn out that way. A few people laughed politely. Donna slipped another beer into his hand. Uncle Bill leaned forward. Yeah, a son would have been something. I sat at the end of the table on a low aluminum folding chair, slightly below everyone else, eating quietly. Rex looked at me. I could see the decision forming. He straightened, cleared his throat, took a long drink from beer number 6, and said it. You know you were an accident, right? He said it standing, facing me, loud enough to cut through every conversation, every child's laughter, every distant firecracker. I wanted a son. The yard went silent immediately. 31 people looking at me. Aunt Carol's plate fell to the grass. She didn't move to retrieve it. Rex continued, But your mother insisted on keeping you. He gestured toward me with the beer. And look how you turned out. A nurse who can't even afford her own place. A child asked for a sparkler. No one responded. Donna stepped forward holding the manila folder, the quitclaim deed, and a silver ballpoint pen, the kind handed out at closings. "Honey," she said evenly, "your dad just needs you to sign this so he can manage the house. It's what your mom would have wanted." She placed the folder beside my plate as if it were part of the meal. Rex addressed the group. "This is a family issue. My daughter's been difficult about basic estate paperwork. I just need a signature." Uncle Bill added, "Just sign it. No need to complicate things." Someone I barely recognized murmured, "Poor Rex. He just wants to keep the house." 31 sets of eyes, some sympathetic, some uneasy, some fixed on the ground. I looked at the pen, the document. My father standing in the yard my mother had built, carrying the certainty of a man rarely challenged. I felt the envelope in my pocket pressing against my ribs. I picked up the pen. I held it over the line where my name was printed. For a brief second, I understood my mother more clearly than ever. This was the pressure she lived with daily. The weight of expectation, the calculation your body makes before your mind does. The thought forms. If I sign, this ends. If I simply agreed, the silence would end. If I gave him what he wanted, I could leave, breathe, and never think about that table again. In that moment, I understood how my mother had spent 30 years saying yes to a man who didn't deserve it. Not because she was weak, but because saying no meant an entire room deciding you were the problem. Rex watched me hold the pen, and I saw it. A flicker of victory. He believed the pressure, the audience, and the alcohol-fueled cruelty would work as they always had. "Don't embarrass me in front of the family, Myra," he said more quietly now, leaning closer. Almost gentle, the way he used to speak to my mother when she hesitated. Around us, someone shifted in a lawn chair. A toddler fussed. Charcoal popped in the grill. I held the pen for 5 full seconds. Then I placed it back on the table, parallel to the quitclaim deed. Precise. Intentional. No. There was no volume behind it, no tremor, just a clear, controlled word. Rex blinked. "Excuse me? I'm not signing this. Not today. Not ever." The silence remained, but it changed, from shock to expectation. My father's face darkened, not with embarrassment, but anger. A familiar anger, the kind that once sent my mother into the kitchen to close the door quietly. "You ungrateful." He stopped himself, recalculated for the audience. "You're just like your mother, useless and stubborn." Louder now, because he always preferred witnesses. "Your mother didn't leave anything behind worth mentioning. A vanity table and some dead flowers. That's her legacy. And you?" He pointed at me. "You're standing here creating drama because you can't do one simple thing for the man who raised you." Donna touched his arm. "Rex, maybe we should." He brushed her off without looking. Her hand dropped. She stepped back. Uncle Bill remained still. Cousin Patty pulled her youngest child closer. A neighbor examined his coleslaw with sudden interest. Rex continued, as he always did. He had built a life on having the final word, and perhaps sensing that control slipping, he crossed a line he should not have crossed. His voice lowered into that controlled register that masked hostility. "Your mother was too weak to do anything right, including raising you." The yard was quiet enough to hear a flag snapping 2 houses away. That was the point where it shifted. I could absorb what he said about me. I had for years. But he said it about her, the woman who had spent her final months ensuring I would stand here prepared. He said it about my mother. Something inside me settled into place. I stood up calmly. Not abruptly. Not angrily. The way I stand at a bedside when a patient's condition declines. Steady, composed, already thinking ahead. I pushed the quitclaim deed across the table toward him. It slid over the checkered cloth and stopped against a bowl of baked beans. "I'm not signing this. Not today. Not ever." Rex opened his mouth, but for once he seemed without words. "And I would be careful about what you say next about my mother." His eyes narrowed. "Or what?" I reached into the pocket over my heart and pulled out the cream-colored envelope I had opened 2 nights earlier at Aunt Carol's kitchen table. I held it up so everyone could see. "Interesting," I said evenly. "Mom told me something different before she died." Rex focused on the envelope, calculating. "Want me to read her letter?" The yard held still. His hand, the one holding the beer, began to tremble slightly, the aluminum making a faint sound. He didn't know what it said, but he knew his wife. A woman silent for decades does not write without reason. I didn't wait. I opened the envelope and unfolded the pages. 3 sheets, written front and back in my mother's careful cursive. The handwriting was steady, not written in illness. Rex stepped forward. Give me that. Whatever she wrote, she wasn't in her right. She wrote that 2 years before the diagnosis, Rex. Aunt Carol's voice carried from the back. I was there when she wrote it. I saw her sign it. Uncle Bill turned. Carol, what's happening? Carol didn't answer him. She looked directly at Rex. This is ridiculous, Rex said. Ellen didn't. You've had your speech, I said calmly, using the same tone I use in the ICU when emotions escalate. Now it's Mom's turn. Donna stood a few feet behind him, gripping her glass with both hands. A warm breeze moved through the yard, carrying the scent of charcoal and grass, lifting the edges of the paper. Without realizing it, the crowd leaned forward. I began. My sweet Myra? My voice caught briefly, then steadied. If you're reading this, I'm no longer there. I'm sorry, not for dying, but for the years I stayed silent. The yard remained still, ice shifted in coolers. Your father told you and told others that you were an accident, that he wanted a son. He has repeated it so often he may believe it. But you deserve the truth. Myra, that's enough, Rex said. I continued without looking up. I wanted you, Myra, more than anything. I spent 2 years in a fertility clinic, 2 years of progesterone injections, monthly blood tests, appointments I attended alone, because your father called it a waste of money. He didn't want a child. Not a son. Not a daughter. He said we couldn't afford it. He said he wasn't ready. He said, and these are his words, kids are a money pit. I'd rather buy a boat. A reaction moved through the group. Cousin Patty covered her mouth. Uncle Bill leaned forward. When I finally became pregnant, he said, fine, but if it's not a boy, don't expect me to be excited. And then you arrived. And you were everything. I paused. Rex's expression shifted. Not just anger or embarrassment, but something deeper. He told people you were an accident because the truth embarrassed him. That a man who called himself head of the household had to be persuaded to become a father. That he resisted at every step. That he agreed only after I told him I would leave if he refused again. From the back, Carol added quietly, she wrote this 2 years before the diagnosis. She was clear, not confused, not medicated. Rex said nothing. The beer hung at his side, condensation dripping unnoticed. Then he moved quickly, stepping toward me, reaching for the letter. Give me that. Before he could reach it, Jake Whitmore stood up from the picnic bench. 25 years old, Carol's son, solid and steady. He stepped between us without aggression, simply present. Uncle Rex, Jake said evenly, let her finish. Rex looked at him with disbelief. In his world, younger men did not interrupt older ones. This is none of your business, boy. It's a family gathering, Jake said. Sounds like family business to me. Rex turned toward the crowd, arms spread, looking for support. Is nobody going to? This is my family, my house, my... Is it, I said. Just 2 words. Calm and steady. I didn't need to raise my voice. Rex stopped. The word hung between us like a test, and for the first time in my life, I watched my father truly hear it. Uncle Bill remained in his Adirondack chair, staring at Rex with something I had never seen before. Not loyalty, something closer to uncertainty. Donna had stepped back. Her Prosecco sat untouched on the table. She stood near the side gate, gripping her car keys. No one stood on Rex's side of the yard anymore. No one had physically moved, but the balance had shifted. 31 people were looking at him, and for once, they weren't looking up. I turned to the second page. The next part, I said, is what matters. I smoothed the paper and read. Myra, there's something about the house you need to understand. Your father has called it his for as long as you can remember. My roof, my rules. You've heard it 1,000 times. Several heads nodded slightly. They had heard it too. But the house at 414 Maple Lane was purchased with $180,000 from my parents, your grandparents, David and Ruth Whitmore. It was their money, an early inheritance they gave me when your father and I first married. They wanted me to have something that was mine. The silence deepened. Not shock now. Recognition. The deed is in my name. Ellen Whitmore Harper. Your father's name has never been on it. He didn't pay for it. He didn't co-sign. It is not his house. It never has been. Rex's face lost its color all at once. I made a will, I continued. A legal will prepared by attorney Richard Avery and witnessed by my sister Carol. The house goes to you, Myra. It was filed and processed through probate after my death. By the time you read this, the title has already transferred. I reached into my other pocket and placed 2 documents on the table, a photocopy of the recorded deed and a certified copy of the relevant page of my mother's will. I set them beside the quitclaim deed Rex had pushed toward me earlier. 3 documents, his version beside hers. Donna spoke first, still by the gate. "Rex, you told me the house was yours." Rex didn't look at her. "It is my house. I've lived here 30 years. Carol's voice came from behind me, steady and direct. "Living somewhere doesn't make it yours, Rex. Paying for it does, and you didn't." Uncle Bill studied the deed without touching it. His jaw tightened as if 30 years of conversations were rearranging themselves in his mind. Rex stood in the center of his own barbecue, surrounded by people who had come for hot dogs, and he had nothing left to say. His hand trembled. I didn't need to raise my voice. The documents spoke clearly. "There's more?" I said evenly. I returned to the letter. "Before I died, I discovered something that made me realize I couldn't leave this to chance. Your father applied for a second mortgage on our home, a home he does not own, through First Regional Bank. The loan officer contacted our family attorney because Rex's name wasn't on the deed. The application was denied." I looked up. Rex stared at me as if I were reading a report he never expected to see. "That's when I knew," I read. "That's when I called Carol. That's when we met with Richard Avery and made everything official. The will, the trust, this letter. Because if your father would try to borrow against a house he doesn't own while I was alive, I had no doubt he would try to take it from you after I was gone." I lowered the page. The reaction moved through the yard in layers. First, the close relatives, Uncle Bill pressing his fingers to the bridge of his nose, Cousin Patty whispering to her husband, then the neighbors exchanging quiet looks. The church ladies fell completely silent. Donna paused halfway through the gate and turned back. "Rex, did you try to mortgage a house that wasn't yours?" "Baby, I can explain. I'm a real estate agent, Rex," she said. "I know what fraud looks like." The gate closed behind her. Moments later, her car started and rolled down the driveway. Rex watched for a few seconds, then sat heavily in his lawn chair. 1 page remained. The first 2 pages had covered facts and evidence. The last page was different. "I have one more thing to say," I read, "and this one is for me, not for him." The yard was still. "I spent 30 years married to your father, and I never once said no. I never argued. I never raised my voice. I never left, even when I should have. I told myself it was for you, that I was keeping the family together. But the truth is, I was afraid." My voice broke. I didn't hide it. "The thing I am most ashamed of," I continued, "is that every time he yelled at you instead of me, part of me felt relieved. And I hated myself for that every time." Cousin Patty was crying openly now. Uncle Bill stood and walked to the edge of the patio, back turned, hands in his pockets. "I can't change what I did and didn't do," I read. "But I can give you what I never had. The house is yours. The trust Carol helped me establish, $220,000, that is yours as well. That is my apology and my love in the same envelope." I read the final line slowly. "You were not an accident, Myra. You were the thing I fought hardest for. Don't be afraid to say what I never could. You are allowed to say no." I folded the letter and placed it back in my scrub pocket. Rex sat in the yard he did not own, beer dripping into the grass, surrounded by 31 people who could no longer meet his eyes. No one spoke. The grill still smoked. The food remained on the tables. The string lights my mother had hung began to glow as evening settled. No one left. It felt like everyone was deciding what kind of family they would be from this point forward. Rex looked around slowly, searching for the familiar nods, the agreement, the quiet support. He found none. "You're all going to believe a dead woman over me?" he said. It landed heavily. No response followed. Jake spoke from the picnic bench, calm and clear. "We're going to believe a notarized will and a property deed, Uncle Rex." Carol stepped beside me. "Richard Avery has the original documents," she said. "You may want to contact your own attorney. You'll likely need one." I gathered the papers, deed, will, unsigned quitclaim, and stacked them neatly. I pushed in my chair. "I'm not selling this house," I said. "I'm not signing anything, and I'm not asking for your permission." I looked at my father one last time. He seemed smaller, not pitiful, just proportionate for the first time. I walked out through the side gate. Carol and Jake followed. Behind us, 31 people sat among paper plates and fading sparklers, reconsidering a story they had accepted for decades. Here's what happened next. That Monday, Richard Avery sent Rex a formal letter by certified mail. It stated clearly that the property at 414 Maple Lane was legally owned by Myra Ellen Harper under the last will and testament of Ellen Whitmore Harper. The estate had been fully processed through probate. Rex A. Harper was occupying the property without legal right. He was given 60 days to vacate. Standard procedure. No theatrics. Rex did not hire an attorney. I later learned from Uncle Bill that his credit card debt alone was $38,000. Add the auto loan on the Dodge Ram, the Weber Grill, the restaurant dinners with Donna, and the image of a man living beyond his means, and there wasn't much left. The house Donna had estimated at $280,000 was never his to sell. The second mortgage application had failed because his name wasn't on the deed. The quitclaim deed he tried to pressure me into signing would have been the only way to make his plan possible. And I hadn't signed it. His entire strategy depended on one assumption, that his daughter would be too afraid to say no. Donna stopped answering his calls within a week. By the end of the month, she had blocked his number. I hold no resentment toward Donna. She was looking for a man with assets, and Rex presented himself as one. That isn't love, but it also isn't my responsibility. The trust my mother created held $220,000, enough to clear my student loans, build an emergency fund, and still leave room for the future. She planned all of it from a hospital bed while Rex was in the garage polishing his truck. She sat at the kitchen table with Carol, building protection out of paperwork and notarized signatures. 2 weeks after the barbecue, Uncle Bill called. I was on the porch of the Maple Lane house, my house, drinking coffee and watching the hydrangeas catch the morning light when his name appeared on my phone. My first instinct was to ignore it. The last time he reached out, he called me selfish and sent me an article about ungrateful daughters. I answered anyway. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I owe you an apology, kid." I waited. I believed everything he told me, that you never visited, that you didn't care, that he handled everything alone. He paused. "Carol told me you were the one who took your mother to chemo, every appointment, for over a year, and Rex looked me in the eye and said you refused to help." I closed my eyes. The damage from a lie often happens long before the truth appears. "He told me a lot of things," Bill continued, "about the house, about your mother, about you, and I believed him because he's my brother. I'm sorry." "Thank you, Uncle Bill," I said. "That means more than you know." He cleared his throat. "One more thing. A few months ago, he asked me to co-sign a personal loan, $20,000. I said no, it didn't sit right." A tired laugh. "Now I understand why." Before he hung up, he added, "Your mom would have been proud of you, Myra." I sat there for a long time after the call. At the end of August, after Rex's 60 days were up, I moved back into the house on Maple Lane. He was already gone when I arrived with my boxes. He'd left it cleaner than I expected. The counters were wiped down, the trash was taken out. Whether that came from guilt or pride, I don't know. Maybe both. Feelings Rex never had the language to explain. The Lizzie boy was gone. He took it with him, the one item in the house that was clearly his. Without it, the living room felt larger and brighter. I replaced the space with a reading chair I found at an estate sale, the same kind my mother used to enjoy visiting. The first thing I did was hang the wedding photo back on the wall. I found it in the garage, inside a box labeled "Donate" in Rex's handwriting. The photo was inside with my mother's winter coat, a few of her favorite books, and at the bottom, wrapped in a dish towel, her nearly empty bottle of Chanel No. 5. I placed it back on the vanity where it had always sat. Carol came over that evening with lasagna and a bottle of wine better than anything Rex ever served. We sat at the counter in comfortable silence. Jake carried boxes upstairs. He didn't offer a speech. He just nodded toward the master bedroom and asked, "You taking that room?" "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." That night, I sat at my mother's vanity for the first time. I looked into the oval mirror she had faced every morning for 30 years. I set her letter against the glass. Then I went outside and watered the hydrangeas. I lived in my mother's house, not my father's, hers, and now mine. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd signed that paper at the barbecue, if I'd given in the way he expected, the way my mother often had, if I had repeated the pattern for another generation. Then I remember she wrote that letter so I wouldn't have to. She spent her final healthy months making sure I would have solid ground and documented proof. Is there someone in your life you've been afraid to say no to? Someone who speaks over your story louder than you do? I'd like to hear about it in the comments. 6 months after the barbecue, Uncle Bill gave me an update. Rex had moved into Bill's spare bedroom. He was picking up extra shifts at the auto parts store. Still assistant manager. Still frustrated about it. Only now, without the security of a house he never owned. Bill said Rex spent most evenings in that spare room watching television on a small screen he brought from Maple Lane. He didn't talk about the barbecue. He didn't talk much at all. Donna blocked him everywhere, phone, email, social media. She moved on to a new listing and I assume a new man with a verified deed. I don't blame her. Rex hasn't called me in 6 months. I haven't called him either. But I want to be clear. I didn't shut the door permanently. I said what needed to be said and stepped back. If he calls, I told Carol one Sunday morning over coffee, I'll answer. But he has to start with the truth, the real truth, not the Rex Harper version. Carol nodded. And if he doesn't call, then that's his choice. I meant it. I'm at peace with both possibilities, whether he finds the courage to be honest for the first time in his life or doesn't. Either way, I'm standing in my own house, paying my own bills, sleeping in a room that still carries the scent of Chanel No. 5. And no one is handing me a pen and telling me to sign away what my mother protected. People ask if it was worth it, the confrontation, the letter, the public exposure. They ask if I feel vindicated, if revenge feels satisfying. Here's my answer. It wasn't revenge. I didn't stand up to embarrass my father. I stood up because my mother asked me to. If not directly, then in every sentence she wrote. She asked me to be the woman she couldn't be. The smallest way I could honor that was to speak when she had stayed silent. My mother spent 30 years afraid. She cooked his meals, folded his clothes, and sat in the passenger seat of her own life. What she couldn't forgive herself for was allowing his anger to fall on me because it meant it wasn't directed at her. She wrote that plainly. No excuses, no softening. I don't hate my father. Hate requires energy. I would rather invest in 12-hour ICU shifts, tending hydrangeas, and Sunday dinners with Carol and Jake. What I feel is quieter and more exact, the understanding that he treated his family like property. And when the paperwork surfaced, nothing was legally his. That 4th of July taught me something important. Boundaries are not selfish. Silence is not the same as peace. And the people who insist on keeping the family together are often not the ones being torn apart. My mother taught me that. She just had to leave this world before she could say it clearly. This morning before my shift, I watered the hydrangeas at 6 a.m. The light was soft and blue. The street was quiet. I stood barefoot in the yard the way my mother used to, still stepping over the second and third porch boards out of habit, even though I repaired them in September. She planted those bushes the first spring after they moved in. Rex wanted them removed. He said they took up too much space. He wanted room for a grill and a horseshoe pit. My mother said no. One of the few times she did. She stood there with soil on her knees and a trowel in her hand and said, "These stay." And they did. For 30 years, through arguments, silence, and every time Rex said "my house" in front of guests, those hydrangeas bloomed. Blue, purple, steady, alive. I think about that often. How she lost most battles in that marriage except the flowers. She chose one thing to defend and held onto it with both hands in the dirt. She couldn't always protect herself, but she protected the hydrangeas, and the deed, and the letter. I turned off the hose and looked at the house glowing in the early light. My yard. If you ask whether what I did was revenge, I'll say no. It was a promise my mother made, and I kept. I think she would appreciate that. That's my story. Thank you for staying to the end. I know it was long, and some parts were difficult to hear. They were difficult to share. If any part of this felt familiar, if you've sat at a table where someone tried to diminish you, if you've held a pen over a document you knew you shouldn't sign, if you've loved someone who failed to protect you and forgave them anyway, I'd like to hear your experience. I read every comment. If this story resonated, consider liking and subscribing. Not for an algorithm, but for the next person who needs to hear that it's okay to say no, even to someone who raised you. And if you'd like another story, there's one linked below about a woman whose family tried to remove her seat at the Thanksgiving table. She didn't have a letter. She had something else. The ending is worth hearing. I'm Myra. I'm 28. I'm an ICU nurse, and I live in my mother's house on Maple Lane, where the hydrangeas bloom every summer, whether anyone gives them permission or not.